When you get people to talk about what they want from each other instead of what's wrong with the other, there's a possibility for reconciliation to begin. Welcome to NVC Life. I'm Rachelle Lamb, veteran NVC trainer and relationship coach, helping listeners navigate interpersonal conflict and ground more deeply into relational living. Greetings, fellow humans. Like most people, I've been paying attention to the news and feeling despair at the catastrophic losses that befall citizens of war-torn countries. It's hard to take in so much devastation. In today's episode, most of what you'll be hearing are the words of Marshall Rosenberg that I have curated from various sources and that, in my opinion, speak directly to the dilemmas that human beings must wrestle with in the face of war. The words and concepts that I encourage you to reflect on as you listen are those pertaining to retributive justice, deserve, enemy images, vengeance, and other similar words. I invite you to take a deep look at how you see and describe unwelcome events that take place in the world as well as within your own life, and to ask yourself, how do I frame the injustices I witness? Do I take a restorative approach or a retributive approach to these matters? I begin with a February 2003 article from The Sun magazine entitled Beyond Good and Evil, Marshall Rosenberg on Creating a Nonviolent World. The article is an interview with Marshall Rosenberg by Diane Killian. Killian asks, if violence is learned, when did it start? It seems to have always been a part of human existence. Rosenberg responds, theologian Walter Wink estimates that violence has been the social norm for about 8,000 years. That's when a myth evolved, that the world was created by a heroic, virtuous male god who defeated an evil female goddess. From that point on, we've had the image of the good guys killing the bad guys. And that has evolved into retributive justice, which says that there are those who deserve to be punished and those who deserve to be rewarded. That belief has penetrated deep into our societies. Not every culture has been exposed to it, but unfortunately, most have. Killian asks, you said that deserve is the most dangerous word in the language. Why? Rosenberg, it's at the basis of retributive justice. For thousands of years, we've been operating under the system that says that people who do bad deeds are evil. Indeed, that human beings are basically evil. According to this way of thinking, a few good people have evolved, and it's up to them to be the authorities and control the others. And the way you control people, given that our nature is evil and selfish, is through a system of justice in which people who behave in a good manner get rewarded, while those who are evil are made to suffer. In order to see such a system as fair, one has to believe that both sides deserve what they get. I used to live in Texas, and when they would execute somebody there, the good Baptist students from the local college would gather outside the prison and have a party. When the word came over the loudspeaker that the convict had been killed, there was a loud cheering and so forth. When you have a concept of justice based on good and evil, in which people deserve to suffer for what they've done, it makes violence enjoyable. This next piece is from the fall 2004 issue of Inquiring Mind titled Interview with Marshall Rosenberg, the Traveling Peacemaker. Inquiring Mind. Does the enemy image have more to do with those who perceive it or those it is projected onto? Rosenberg. An enemy image always has to do with the person who perceives it. It's our thinking, not other people's behavior, that makes us angry. Angry, judgmental, and punitive thoughts are always an expression of our unmet needs. When people are out of touch with themselves, they become good slaves to authority. Loving women have no needs, so they sacrifice themselves for their families. Brave men have no needs, so they're willing to sacrifice their lives for the king or the president. If you want people to be docile and subservient, disconnect them from their needs. This shapes their brains to wonder how others are judging them instead of focusing on how to meet their unmet needs. Inquiring mind. Could you give us a concrete example from the international work that you've done in conflict resolution? Rosenberg. About 8 years ago, I was mediating between a Muslim tribe and a Christian tribe in northern Nigeria. In their conflict, a quarter of the population had been killed. At that time, they were fighting about how many places in the marketplace each side would have to display their products. I started the reconciliation process with them by saying that I was confident that if we could hear each other's needs, we could find a way to get everybody's needs met. Inviting whoever wanted to start, I asked, "What needs of yours are not getting met?" The chief from the Christian tribe screamed, "You people are murderers!" Notice that when I asked him what needs weren't getting met, his response was to tell me what was wrong with the other side. This provoked a counter-judgment. Somebody on the Muslim side screamed back, "You've been trying to dominate us. We're not going to tolerate it anymore." Because our training is based on the assumption that all violent language is a tragic expression of unmet needs, when the chiefs finished screaming, my job was to translate the enemy image of murderer into language describing the needs of the person who screamed. I said, "Chief, are you saying that your need for safety is not being met, and you want some agreement that no matter what the conflict, that it be resolved some other way than violence?" He looked shocked for a moment, because that is different from how people are trained to think. Then he said, "That's exactly right." But getting the chief to acknowledge his need wasn't enough. I had to get the Muslim side to see through their enemy image. I said, "Would somebody on the other side please tell me what you heard the chief say his needs were?" A gentleman from the Muslim tribe screamed back, "Then why did you kill my son?" In fact, there were several others in the Muslim tribe who knew that someone present had killed one of their children. So there were a lot of feelings. The Muslim tribe had to put down their rage long enough to hear the needs of the Christian tribe, and that wasn't easy. I had to give them some empathy before they could do that. But finally, I got them to hear just one simple thing, that the Christian tribe had said they had a need for safety. It took me about an hour and a half to get both sides to release the enemy image long enough to hear a need of the other side. At that point, one of the chiefs came up and said to me, "If we know how to communicate this way, we don't have to kill each other." In another example, a group of Israelis and Palestinians on the West Bank were hoping to be able to work toward peace in that area. I asked, "What is it you want from each other that would make it easier for you to work together?" The Palestinian mayor of the village responded by telling the Israelis, "You people are a bunch of Nazis." Predictably, one of the Israelis fired back, "That was totally insensitive for you to say." So instead of peace and harmony, they were creating violence and hostility. I helped them translate their judgments into what it was they were wanting from one another. When you get people to talk about what they want from each other instead of what's wrong with the other, there's a possibility for reconciliation to begin. This last piece comes from a recording of a workshop that Marshall Rosenberg delivered in San Francisco during the year 2000. Marshall is at this point telling the audience that our feelings don't come from what others do, but rather from what we tell ourselves about what they've done. Someone in the introductory workshop asks Marshall this question: "If someone else cannot cause our emotional pain, I think about the abuse that I grew up with and that I see in a lot of families, in the suffering that I've experienced throughout my life, through my recovery and all that, right?" Marshall responds, "Yes, other people were a stimulus for your suffering, and you are a participant by how you dealt with it. For example, if you follow me in my work, you would see this very clearly in places like Rwanda, Burundi, Sierra Leone. I'm working with people that have had their families killed. Some of those people have such rage that all they live for, moment by moment, is the possibility of vengeance. Others have no anger, have never had anger. Same exact stimulus. They have deep feelings, not rage. It is not the stimulus that determines how our emotional reaction is. That part is up to us. I've worked with some women, unfortunately a lot, who've been raped. Some of them feel shame, deep shame. Some feel rage. Some feel other things. The same stimulus depends on how people take it, whether they feel shame, rage, or other things. I'm working with a woman from Rwanda who heard her 3 children being killed. She managed to get underneath the sink to hide. And unfortunately, her children didn't make it to the hiding place. They were killed. She heard them. She heard her husband being killed and her brother. She had to stay underneath there for several days to save her own life because they stayed in the house after they killed the family. This woman has deep feelings, but never once has she had the anger that makes her want to get vengeance. She puts all of her feelings, and lots of them, into preventing this from happening to anybody else, you see. So the way she looked at it leads her to want to prevent this from happening to anybody else. She came to my workshop because she wanted to know how to deal with the rage toward her from other people in her tribe who are furious with her that she won't join their efforts to kill the other people. Same stimulus, quite different reactions. The audience member says, okay, so I had the stimulus and somewhere I learned how to deal with it in the way that I had dealt with it. I'm learning to change that now. Marshall responds, the worst thing, of course, would be, no matter how you did choose to deal with it, is to think there was something wrong with how you chose to deal with it. I'm not wanting us to get into one way as right or wrong. I'm just saying that no matter what happens to us, the other person's responsible for what they did. I'm not saying the other person doesn't have responsibility. The audience member says, that's my question about accountability. Marshall continues, that person is responsible for what they did and why they did it. We are responsible for how we deal with that. There's a long pause here, and you can tell the speaker's both perplexed and curious. He asks, let's see, I'm just wondering how a child becomes responsible? Marshall answers, I wouldn't want to teach the child the lesson I just taught you until I had given that child all the empathy that child needed, and I would guess it would be a lot. So I can see myself dealing with a long time of hearing this child's enormous pain as a result of this. But then, in the course of this, I would be seeing this child having some pain created by how they looked at it, so I would see that they're creating pain on top of pain by how they looked at it. So after the child had all the empathy he or she needed, then I would do what I could to get them to see it in a way that wouldn't create unnecessary pain for themselves. So I conclude the episode here. I sometimes think that a good many people, and this includes me at times, want the solutions to the world's problem to be clear, and they're not. There's nothing that any one of us can do individually to once and finally resolve enduring complex situations affecting us collectively. There is, however, something that each and every one of us can do individually that can make a great difference, and that is to reflect on how we see any given situation and how we in turn respond to it. The language we use to describe challenging dilemmas and then respond to them will do one of 3 things: add to the strife, help lessen the strife, or maintain the status quo. I leave you with 2 quotes from Marshall. If we believe that people are evil, then therefore they have to be punished or killed. You provoke in other people the very behavior that convinces you that your stereotype of them is true. And the second quote, all human beings have the same needs. When our consciousness is focused on what's alive in us, we never see an alien being in front of us. Other people may have different strategies for meeting their needs, but they are not aliens. Thank you for tuning into NVC Life. For future episodes, be sure to subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, or YouTube. For free resources or to book a private session with me, head over to RachelleLamb.com. Until the next time, stay sane, grateful, and generous.